Hey coin lovers! Welcome to the Worth Old Coins channel, your place to discover the hidden value and rare facts about old coins. In today's video we're revealing the top 6 valuable coins, and one of them might just be in your collection. So don't skip this video, let's find out their real worth. Top 1. The America Quarter Dollar 1979. D coin, more commonly referred to as the Washington Quarter, is a fascinating piece of United States numismatic history that combines elements of national heritage, artistry, monetary evolution, and cultural symbolism, making it far more significant than its face value of 25 cents might suggest. The 1979 quarter belongs to the series of Washington quarters first issued in 1932, a series created to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, the first president of the United States and the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army during the American Revolution, and one of the most iconic figures in U.S. history. The obverse of the coin features a bust of Washington designed by sculptor John Flanagan based on a bust created by Jean-Antoine Houdon in 1786, showing Washington facing left with the inscription Liberty above, the motto, "In God We Trust," to the left, and the year 1979 beneath, while the small D mint mark signifies that this particular coin was struck at the Denver Mint, one of the most important U.S. mint facilities. The reverse side of the 1979 quarter still carried the original heraldic eagle design, also by Flanagan, which had been in use since 1932 and remained until 1998, depicting a powerful bald eagle with outstretched wings clutching a bundle of arrows in its talons, symbolizing military readiness, with 2 olive branches beneath representing the nation's desire for peace, and the inscriptions, United States of America, e pluribus unum, Latin for out of many one, and quarter dollar. Technically, the 1979 D quarter is composed of a copper-nickel clad alloy rather than the 90% silver composition used for quarters before 1965, reflecting the great monetary transition of the mid-1960s when rising silver prices forced the U.S. Mint to remove silver from circulation coins to prevent hoarding. The clad composition consists of a pure copper core sandwiched between 2 layers of copper-nickel alloy, giving the coin its distinctive silvery appearance while keeping production economical. It weighs 5.67 grams, has a diameter of 24.26 millimeters, and a thickness of 1.75 millimeters with a reeded edge of 119 reeds. The Denver Mint produced 489,789,780 quarters in 1979, a massive mintage reflecting America's growing population and the need for circulating coinage in an economy that relied heavily on cash transactions at that time, especially in vending machines, payphones, and everyday retail exchanges. Because of this high mintage, most 1979 D quarters remain common in circulation today and hold little to no premium over face value in circulated condition, though higher grade examples, particularly in uncirculated, mint state, condition or with unusual errors, attract collector interest. From a historical standpoint, the 1979 D quarter was struck during a period of significant economic and political turbulence in the United States. The late 1970s were marked by stagflation, a troubling combination of inflation and stagnant economic growth coupled with rising oil prices due to the energy crises of the 1970s. At the same time, President Jimmy Carter was in office, dealing with challenges ranging from the Iran hostage crisis to debates over America's energy policies and Cold War tensions. The quarter, as a piece of circulating currency, witnessed these economic and social struggles firsthand, passing through the hands of millions of Americans who faced rising costs of living and economic uncertainty. The 1979 quarter also predates the significant coinage changes of the 1980s and 1990s, making it part of the long era of the classic Washington quarter before the state quarters program revolutionized American coinage in 1999. In terms of numismatic interest, the 1979 D quarter is most notable not for its rarity, since it is extremely common, but for the subtle variations and errors that can sometimes be found. Collectors look for coins with high mint state grades, MS65 and above, which are difficult to find due to the quarter's heavy circulation, as well as for minting errors such as off-center strikes, double dies, clipped planchets, or coins struck on the wrong planchet, which can transform an ordinary 25-cent coin into a highly desirable collectible worth tens or even hundreds of dollars. Another point of collector appeal is the sheen and strike quality. Some 1979 D quarters have particularly strong strikes with sharp detail in Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers, and these examples command a small premium. Proof versions of the 1979 quarter were struck at the San Francisco Mint, with the S mint mark, for collectors, but the 1979 D is strictly a circulation strike intended for everyday commerce. Symbolically, the 1979 D Washington quarter represents both continuity and change. It reflects the enduring legacy of George Washington as the face of the nation, a design that had already lasted nearly half a century by that point and was beloved by the public, but it also symbolizes the monetary adaptations America had undergone, especially in the shift away from silver coinage and toward modern clad alloys. The bald eagle on the reverse reinforces traditional American ideals of strength, vigilance, and peace through preparedness values that resonated during the uncertain years of the Cold War. For many Americans alive in 1979, the quarter was not just spare change, but a common link to national heritage carried in their pockets daily, used in jukeboxes, buses, and laundromats, serving as both a utilitarian tool and a circulating piece of national art. Today, while the 1979 D quarter remains one of the most common coins still found in pocket change, its significance lies in its place within the broader narrative of U.S. coinage. It marks the later decades of the Washington quarter's original design before the dramatic shift to statehood and commemorative quarters, and it encapsulates the economic atmosphere of late 1970s America. Collectors, historians, and everyday citizens can look at this coin and see more than just 25 cents. They see a piece of history that ties together Washington's legacy, the resilience of the American economy, and the evolving story of U.S. currency. Though most examples will always be worth only a quarter, pristine mint state survivors and unique errors remind us that even the most ordinary coin can carry extraordinary stories. Top 2. The America Quarter Dollar 1978. D coin, popularly known as the Washington quarter, is one of the most widely recognized and circulated pieces of United States coinage, and although at first glance it may appear to be just another ordinary coin with a face value of 25 cents, a deeper exploration reveals that it carries with it a wealth of historical, economic, artistic, and cultural significance. The Washington quarter was first introduced in 1932 to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, and the design that appeared in 1978 remained almost entirely unchanged from its debut more than 4 decades earlier, reflecting both the durability of John Flanagan's original artistic concept and the enduring reverence the United States has for its first president, George Washington, who symbolizes leadership, independence, and the very founding principles of the nation. The obverse of the 1978 D quarter displays a left-facing bust of Washington adapted from a famous Jean-Antoine Houdon sculpture of the president with the word "Liberty" inscribed boldly above his head, the motto, "In God We Trust," placed to the left in smaller font, and the date 1978 struck below the bust, while just to the right of the ribbon in Washington's hair appears a small D mint mark, identifying that this particular coin was produced at the Denver Mint in Colorado, one of the primary production facilities of the United States Mint, which has been striking coins since the 1906 opening of its branch in Denver to meet the increasing demand for circulating coinage in the expanding American West. The reverse of the coin retains John Flanagan's original heraldic eagle design, which was used on all quarters from 1932 through 1998, except for the bicentennial issue of 1976. The design features a proud and powerful bald eagle perched upon a bundle of arrows representing the nation's strength and readiness to defend itself, with olive branches beneath signifying America's preference for peace, while around the periphery are the inscriptions United States of America, e pluribus unum, Latin for out of many 1 inch, and the denomination quarter dollar, making this coin not only a monetary instrument but also a miniature piece of symbolic national art circulating in the hands of millions of citizens. Technically speaking, the 1978 D quarter is composed of a copper-nickel clad alloy which was introduced in 1965 to replace the traditional 90% silver quarters that had been used since the early 19th century. This change was brought about by rising silver prices in the 1960s that made the intrinsic value of silver coins exceed their face value, leading to hoarding and a shortage of circulating coinage. As a result, the Coinage Act of 1965 mandated the use of this new clad composition consisting of a pure copper core sandwiched between 2 layers of a copper-nickel alloy, 75% copper and 25% nickel, which gives the coin its silvery color but without the high intrinsic value of precious metal. The 1978 D quarter weighs 5.67 grams, has a diameter of 24.26 millimeters, a thickness of 1.75 millimeters, and a reeded edge with 119 tiny grooves, a feature originally intended to discourage shaving or clipping small amounts of precious metal from coin edges in earlier centuries, but maintained for modern uniformity and recognition. The Denver Mint struck a massive 287,373,152 quarters in 1978, making this a high mintage coin that remains common to this day, reflecting the heavy reliance of the late 1970s American economy on coinage for vending machines, parking meters, laundromats, pay phones, arcades, and everyday cash transactions, while the enormous mintage makes most circulated examples worth only their face value of 25 cents. Pristine mint state specimens, particularly those graded MS-65 or higher, do carry collector Premiums and certain rare mint errors such as double dies off-center strikes and clipped planchets can be worth significantly more, sometimes even hundreds of dollars, depending on rarity and condition. Historically, the 1978 D quarter emerged during an era of economic turbulence in the United States as the nation grappled with stagflation, a troubling mix of high inflation, stagnant growth, and unemployment, while also experiencing the lasting aftereffects of the Vietnam War, the Watergate scandal, and a crisis of public trust in government institutions. President Jimmy Carter was in office in 1978, navigating a politically divided America and facing mounting challenges in foreign affairs such as Cold War tensions and Middle East instability, alongside domestic struggles, including energy shortages and inflation that affected the daily lives of ordinary Americans. In this context, the quarter served as a small but tangible reminder of national continuity, carrying the image of Washington as a symbol of strength and unity in an uncertain time, while also reflecting the adaptations of the American monetary system to modern realities. The fact that the quarter remained unchanged in design for so many decades speaks to the American tendency to balance tradition with gradual change, a quality that has often defined U.S. coinage. From a numismatic perspective, the 1978 D quarter is often considered a modern common coin, meaning that it is not rare and can still be found in circulation today, but that does not diminish its interest to collectors who appreciate it as part of a larger historical narrative. Collectors may focus on building complete date and mint mark sets of Washington quarters, and the 1978 D is an essential piece within the clad series spanning from 1965 through 1998. Its place just before the major transformation of the quarter in 1999, when the 50-state quarters program was launched, makes it part of the last era of the classic Washington quarter design, which many numismatists and older Americans remember with nostalgia. The sharpness of strike quality also varies between Denver and Philadelphia issues, with some 1978 D quarters exhibiting better detail in Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers, details that serious collectors scrutinize carefully. Additionally, the Denver Mint's output often included minor striking errors due to the sheer volume of coins produced, and specialists in error coinage continue to search for unique and valuable anomalies among these common quarters. Culturally, the 1978 D quarter can be seen as a coin of transition, connecting the silver-based currency era of the early 20th century to the clad era of modern American coinage, and bridging the gap between the traditional heraldic eagle reverse and the more creative, commemorative designs that would later dominate American quarters in the 21st century. It is also a coin that would have passed through countless hands in late 1970s America, being used by families at movie theaters, diners, arcades, or gas stations, and therefore holds a kind of collective memory of that decade's daily life. For people who grew up during that time, finding a 1978 quarter today might bring back memories of inflation-driven price increases, long gas lines during the energy crisis, or even the rise of cultural phenomena like disco, Star Wars, and the beginnings of personal computing, all of which were part of the broader atmosphere of 1978 America. In conclusion, while the 1978 D Washington quarter may not carry intrinsic silver value or widespread rarity, it is nevertheless a richly symbolic and historically significant piece of American currency. Top 3. The America Quarter Dollar 1968 D coin. More commonly known as the Washington quarter, minted in Denver in the year 1968, is a fascinating and historically rich piece of United States numismatic heritage, serving not only as a functional unit of commerce worth 25 cents, but also as a small artifact of an era defined by cultural upheaval, political transformation, and significant monetary evolution within the United States Mint itself. And while at first glance it may appear to be a very common clad quarter that has little more than face value, upon deeper inspection, it reveals an extraordinary story that blends art, economy, national symbolism, and the broader context of late 1960s America. The Washington quarter series, first issued in 1932 to mark the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, had by 1968 become a familiar fixture in American pockets and purses, circulating widely as one of the most used denominations in daily life, essential for vending machines, laundromats, arcades, payphones, and countless small transactions. And the obverse of the coin in 1968 still bore the classic design of sculptor John Flanagan, which was based on Jean-Antoine Houdon's neoclassical bust of George Washington, displaying the first president of the United States facing left with a calm and dignified profile. Around Washington's image, the inscriptions remain highly symbolic. Liberty is struck prominently above, underscoring the nation's founding principle, "In God We Trust," is positioned just left of Washington's portrait, reflecting the nation's religious motto adopted in the mid-20th century as a spiritual counterpoint to Cold War tensions, and the year of minting 1968 is found directly below Washington's chin, anchoring the coin firmly in its time. To the right of Washington's necktie ribbon, a small but important letter appears, the D mint mark. denoting that this quarter was produced at the Denver Mint in Colorado, one of the nation's major minting facilities that has been striking coinage since 1906, and this detail is of great importance because prior to 1968 mint marks had been temporarily removed from coins during the years 1965 to 1967 in an effort to discourage hoarding during the transition away from silver coinage, meaning that the 1968 D. Washington quarter marks the return of mint marks to U.S. coins, a seemingly small change, but one that holds immense numismatic significance since collectors and historians alike recognize it as a turning point in modern American coinage policy. The reverse design of the 1968 D quarter remains the same as that used since the series' inception in 1932, except for the special bicentennial issue in 1976, featuring the heraldic eagle designed by Flanagan, a proud bald eagle with wings spread majestically perched upon a bundle of arrows as a symbol of military preparedness, with two olive branches below representing peace, a delicate balance between strength and diplomacy that defines the American national identity. Surrounding this central motif are the inscriptions United States of America, across the top the Latin motto E pluribus unum, out of many one. Between the eagle's wings and the denomination $quarter, at the bottom affirming the coin's legal tender value. By 1968, however, the quarter was no longer struck in silver, as the Coinage Act of 1965 had permanently ended the use of 90% silver in circulating dimes and quarters due to rising silver prices that made the intrinsic value of coins exceed their face value, causing massive hoarding during the early 1960s. Instead, the 1968 D quarter was composed of a copper-nickel-clad alloy consisting of a pure copper core sandwiched between two layers of copper-nickel, 75% copper and 25% nickel, which gave the coin a silvery appearance while keeping costs manageable and preventing further hoarding, and this transition marked a defining feature of modern American coinage. Technically, the coin weighs 5.67 grams, has a diameter of 24.26 millimeters, thickness of 1.75 millimeters, and a reeded edge with 119 tiny grooves, which, while no longer serving the original purpose of preventing shaving of precious metal, still provided tactile recognition and continuity with past designs. The mintage of the 1968 D quarter was extraordinarily high, with the Denver Mint producing over 101,534,000 coins, reflecting the enormous demand for quarters in circulation during the late 1960s, a period when coin-operated machines dominated aspects of daily American life. With such a high mintage, most circulated examples of the 1968 D quarter hold little more than face value to collectors, yet pristine mint state examples graded MS65 or higher are considerably scarcer and command higher premiums in the numismatic market, particularly if they display strong strikes with full detail in Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers. Collectors also seek out varieties and minting errors from this year, such as off-center strikes, double dies, or clipped planchets, which, while rare, can significantly increase a coin's desirability and value. Furthermore, the 1968 D issue has an additional numismatic layer of importance because it coincided with the introduction of the San Francisco Mint's proof coinage program, which began striking proof quarters again in 1968 after a 3-year hiatus, although these proof coins carried the S mint mark rather than D and were never intended for circulation. Culturally and historically, the 1968 D quarter was produced during a turbulent period in American history, a year often remembered as one of the most tumultuous of the 20th century. The nation was in the midst of the Vietnam War, which dominated political and social life, and 1968 witnessed the tragic assassinations of both Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Senator Robert F. Kennedy, events that shook the country to its core. Domestically, the United States experienced widespread civil rights protests, anti-war demonstrations, and political unrest, with 1968 also marking the height of the counterculture movement. In this context, the Washington quarter, carrying the enduring image of the nation's first president, provided a symbolic anchor of continuity and unity, reinforcing ideals of liberty and leadership at a time when many Americans felt the country was deeply divided. To the average citizen in 1968, the quarter was a practical tool for everyday life, used in payphones to call loved ones, dropped into jukeboxes to play songs, or spent on groceries, gas, or entertainment. Yet today, looking back, it can be seen as a silent witness to one of the most dramatic years in U.S. history. From a collector's standpoint, the 1968 D Washington quarter sits at a crossroads between the classic silver era of American quarters, 1932 to 1964, and the modern-clad era, 1965 to 1998, making it historically significant as one of the early fully clad issues to reintroduce mint marks, thereby restoring a tradition that coin collectors had long cherished. Top 4. The America Quarter Dollar 1967 coin, more commonly known as the Washington Quarter of that year, is a numismatic artifact that perfectly encapsulates a critical transitional period in United States coinage, monetary policy, and cultural history, standing as a symbol of the sweeping changes that defined the mid to late 1960s both within the mint and in American society at large. And though at first glance it may appear to be nothing more than a common 25-cent piece used for payphones, jukeboxes, laundromats, or small purchases, a closer examination reveals a coin that reflects deep layers of artistry, political decisions, economic challenges, and national identity. The Washington Quarter series began in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth and the design by sculptor John Flanagan, featuring a left-facing bust of the first president based on Jean-Antoine Houdon's neoclassical sculpture, had by 1967 become firmly ingrained in American life, symbolizing strength, continuity, and patriotism. On the obverse of the 1967 quarter, Washington's dignified portrait dominates the center with the word "Liberty" arching above as a reminder of the nation's founding ideals, the national motto, "In God We Trust," placed to the left, and the date 1967 positioned below his bust, anchoring the coin in its time. But one striking difference that numismatists immediately notice is the absence of a mint mark. There is no D for Denver, S for San Francisco, or P for Philadelphia, because in 1965 the U.S. Mint, responding to widespread coin shortages and rampant hoarding caused by rising silver prices, made the extraordinary decision to remove mint marks entirely from coins for 3 years, 1965, 1966, and 1967, hoping to reduce speculative collecting and encourage coins to circulate freely again, making the 1967 quarter part of this unusual and historically important no mint mark era in modern American coinage. The reverse design remained the same as it had since 1932, with Flanagan depiction of the heraldic eagle, a bold American bald eagle with its wings outstretched, perched upon a bundle of arrows symbolizing readiness for defense, while below the eagle are olive branches representing the nation's commitment to peace, creating a balance between strength and diplomacy. Above the eagle, the words "United States of America" affirm national identity, while between the eagle's wings appears the motto "E pluribus unum," out of many one, and the denomination quarter dollar runs along the bottom edge, completing a reverse that was at once functional, symbolic, and deeply tied to America's image of itself during the Cold War era. But perhaps the most significant technical feature of the 1967 Washington Quarter is its composition. Unlike earlier quarters struck in 90% silver and 10% copper, the 1967 issue was made of a copper-nickel clad composition with a pure copper core bonded to outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving it a silvery appearance without containing any silver at all. This change, mandated by the Coinage Act of 1965, was a response to a monetary crisis in which the intrinsic value of silver coins had begun to exceed their face value, leading to massive hoarding and melting of silver coinage, and the new clad composition was designed to stabilize the coinage system, ensuring quarters remained in circulation without being siphoned away for bullion. The technical specifications of the 1967 quarter: 24.26 mm in diameter, 5.67 grams in weight, 1.75 mm thick, with a reeded edge of 119 tiny grooves, remain consistent with earlier silver quarters, maintaining continuity for the public even as the metal changed dramatically inside. In terms of mintage, the 1967 Washington Quarter was struck in enormous numbers at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, though none bear mint marks, with more than 1.5 billion pieces produced in total, reflecting the mint's urgent drive to alleviate the coin shortage that had plagued the nation during the early 1960s, when vending machines, payphones, laundromats, and everyday commerce desperately needed circulating coins. Because of this massive mintage, the 1967 quarter is considered common today in circulated grades and generally carries only face value, yet higher grade uncirculated examples, especially those graded MS-65 or higher, can be scarce and command premiums among collectors, as do rare mint errors such as double strikes, off-center strikes, or clipped planchets that slipped through the mint's quality control processes during this high-output year. Importantly, 1967 was also the year the U.S. Mint introduced special mint sets, SMS, rather than proof coins, since proof production had been suspended after 1964. These SMS coins, struck in San Francisco, feature sharper details, stronger strikes, and smoother surfaces than regular circulation coins, making them highly desirable among collectors and serving as the closest equivalent to proofs for that year, though they too bear no mint mark. Beyond its numismatic features, the 1967 quarter holds cultural and historical significance as a coin that circulated during One of the most dramatic years in modern American history, the year 1967 was marked by the escalation of the Vietnam War, with massive anti-war protests sweeping across the country, as well as the continued momentum of the civil rights movement, urban unrest in major cities, and a generational clash embodied in the rise of the counterculture. It was also the year of the Summer of Love in San Francisco, when tens of thousands of young people gathered in Haight-Ashbury to promote ideals of peace, love, and cultural revolution, while music from artists like Jimi Hendrix, The Doors, and the Beatles defined the era's soundtrack. Against this backdrop of turbulence and transformation, the Washington Quarter served as a small but steady reminder of national unity, continuity, and the enduring legacy of George Washington as a stabilizing symbol in uncertain times, and its presence in the pockets and purses of everyday Americans made it both an instrument of commerce and a silent witness to social change. From a collector's perspective, the 1967 Washington Quarter occupies a fascinating place in U.S. numismatic history, bridging the gap between the classic silver coinage that ended in 1964 and the fully modern-clad coinage that would dominate the late 20th century, and it represents the unusual period of experimentation by the mint to control coin circulation by eliminating mint marks and producing special mint sets. While not rare in the traditional sense, its historical context and technical significance make it a must-have for any serious Washington Quarter collection, and the fact that it embodies the early years of America's transition away from precious metal coinage only deepens its importance. In conclusion, the 1967 quarter dollar is much more than a simple copper-nickel coin. It is a tangible artifact of an America in flux, a year when the nation struggled with war abroad, protest at home, and cultural revolution, while simultaneously reshaping its coinage system to adapt to modern economic realities. Top 5. The America Quarter Dollar 1966 coin, officially part of the Washington Quarter series, represents a fascinating and transitional chapter in United States numismatic history, as it captures the economic realities, political decisions, and cultural backdrop of mid-1960s America, and though at first glance it seems like a simple copper-nickel 25-cent piece with a familiar portrait of George Washington, when examined closely it reveals layers of historical, artistic, and technical significance that connect to both the legacy of the nation's first president and the turbulent era of its production. Since the Washington Quarter had first been introduced in 1932 as a one-year commemorative marking the bicentennial of Washington's birth, but proved so popular that it became a permanent fixture of U.S. coinage, with a sculptor John Flanagan design showing Washington's left-facing bust derived from Jean-Antoine Houdon's famous sculpture, and by 1966 the design had become a long-standing symbol of stability, patriotism, and continuity for the American people. On the obverse, Washington's head dominates the center with the bold inscription Liberty, above the national motto, In God We Trust, at the left, and the date 1966 placed prominently below his profile. But a numismatically striking feature of this coin is the absence of any mint mark, a deliberate policy of the U.S. Mint from 1965 through 1967 intended to discourage hoarding and speculative collecting, because the rising silver prices of the early 1960s had led to massive shortages of coins as people pulled silver quarters, dimes, and half dollars out of circulation, forcing the mint to transition into new base metal coinage and flood the economy with billions of pieces. So by removing mint marks from all coins during these years, they hoped to make them appear less collectible and ensure they were used in commerce rather than saved, which makes the 1966 quarter an important part of this unusual three-year no mint mark era in American coinage. On the reverse, Flanagan original eagle motif remained unchanged, with a proud heraldic bald eagle wings spread wide clutching a bundle of arrows to symbolize readiness for defense, and olive branches below representing peace, framed by the inscriptions United States of America across the top, E pluribus unum between the eagle's wings, and quarter dollar at the bottom, a simple yet powerful imagery reflecting both the nation's ideals and its Cold War era emphasis on strength combined with diplomacy. Compositionally, the 1966 quarter is of great significance because it marked only the second full year of the clad copper-nickel quarter, no longer struck in the traditional 90% silver and 10% copper alloy, but instead consisting of an inner core of pure copper sandwiched between outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving it a silvery appearance without any intrinsic precious metal content, a transformation mandated by the Coinage Act of 1965, which permanently eliminated silver from the dime and quarter and reduced it in the half dollar, a move necessitated by the fact that silver bullion values were surpassing coin face values, leading to hoarding and threatening to destabilize the nation's circulating coin supply. And so the 1966 issue symbolizes America's decisive break from its centuries-old tradition of silver coinage and the dawn of the modern era of base metal money. Technically, the quarter retained its familiar specifications: 24.26 millimeters in diameter, 5.67 grams in weight, 1.75 millimeters in thickness, with a reeded edge ensuring continuity for the public, even as the internal content radically shifted, and the mintage was enormous, with well over 820 million quarters struck that year as the mint worked feverishly to meet commercial demand and resolve the ongoing coin shortage crisis. Because of this high production, circulated 1966 quarters are extremely common today and typically worth only face value, though higher grade uncirculated specimens, especially those graded MS66 or above, carry collector premiums, while rare mint errors like double strikes, clipped planchets, or off-center coins also hold added value, and collectors also prize the 1966 issue for being part of the Special Mint Set (SMS) program, since the mint had suspended proof coin production between 1965 and 1967 and instead issued SMS coins struck on specially prepared dies with a shinier, sharper finish. These coins produced in San Francisco but lacking any mint mark, and the 1966 SMS quarter stands today as a sought-after example for numismatists who focus on 1960s transitional issues beyond its metallic and mintage history. The 1966 quarter resonates as a cultural artifact of the broader United States of the 1960s, a time of profound social change, political unrest, and technological optimism, as 1966 was the height of the Vietnam War escalation, the era of the Civil Rights Movement, the beginnings of the counterculture revolution, and a time when the American space program was racing toward the moon. So while Americans of the time carried these quarters in their pockets for daily purchases such as payphones, parking meters, or candy machines, the coins themselves circulated against the backdrop of protests, cultural shifts, and Cold War anxieties, making them silent witnesses to a nation in flux. Therefore, the 1966 Washington quarter is not just a piece of copper-nickel alloy, but a snapshot of American economic history, a response to the silver crisis, a reflection of mint policy innovations like the removal of mint marks and the SMS program, and a tangible link to a turbulent year in U.S. history. And while common in terms of sheer numbers, it remains highly significant to collectors and historians as both a transitional coin and a symbol of adaptation, resilience, and continuity in American coinage, demonstrating how even a small everyday object like a $quarter can embody an extraordinary story of national identity, economic policy, and cultural memory. Top 6. The America $quarter 1965 coin, belonging to the Washington Quarter series, holds a very special place in U.S. numismatic history because it was the first year of issue struck without any silver content, representing a major turning point in the nation's coinage system, monetary policy, and broader economic history. And while it may look outwardly identical to the quarters that had circulated since 1932, the 1965 quarter is in fact a transitional coin that marked the official end of 90% silver quarters and the beginning of the modern copper-nickel-clad era, a change that reflected both rising global silver prices and the urgent need of the U.S. government to maintain stability in its circulating coin supply. To fully appreciate the 1965 quarter, one must understand the historical backdrop. For decades, U.S. dimes, quarters, and half dollars were struck in 90% silver and 10% copper, a precious metal composition that gave intrinsic value to coins. But by the early 1960s, the price of silver began climbing toward a point where the bullion value of the coins was close to or even exceeded their face value, causing widespread hoarding, melting, and shortages of small change in daily commerce. President Lyndon B. Johnson and Congress responded with the Coinage Act of 1965, one of the most important coinage laws in modern U.S. history, which permanently removed silver from dimes and quarters and reduced the silver content in half dollars to 40%, and introduced instead a sandwich copper-nickel-clad composition for quarters and dimes, consisting of an inner pure copper core with outer layers of a copper-nickel alloy, 75% copper, 25% nickel, bonded together to give the appearance of a silvery surface while avoiding the use of precious metals, and thus ensuring the mint could continue mass production without fear of people melting coins for profit. Design-wise, the 1965 quarter continued to feature John Flanagan's 1932 portrait of George Washington, modeled after Jean-Antoine Houdon's famous 1785 bust, with Washington's left-facing profile dominating the obverse, the word Liberty, arched above the motto, "In God We Trust," placed to the left of his chin, and the date 1965 inscribed directly below his bust. Notably, the 1965 issue, like the 1966 and 1967 quarters, carried no mint mark, a deliberate policy decision by the U.S. Mint to discourage collectors from pulling coins out of circulation during the height of the coin shortage, since removing mint marks made the coins appear uniform regardless of their place of production, whether Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco. On the reverse, Flanagan's majestic bald eagle design remained unchanged, with the eagle standing tall, wings spread wide, perched upon a bundle of arrows symbolizing military strength and preparedness, while olive branches curve beneath as an emblem of peace. The inscriptions, "United States of America," above, "E Pluribus Unum," just below the eagle's head, and "$quarter," below completing a design that had become by then a familiar and trusted part of America's coinage for over 3 decades. In terms of physical characteristics, the 1965 quarter weighed 5.67 grams, had a diameter of 24.26 millimeters, a thickness of 1.75 millimeters, and a reeded edge of 119 reeds, all specifications intentionally kept nearly identical to the earlier silver issues to avoid confusion in circulation, though the clad coin's distinctive copper-colored edge, where the inner copper core shows through, made it visually distinguishable upon close inspection. The mintage was extraordinarily high, over 1.8 billion. Quarters were struck in 1965, an unprecedented number at that time, reflecting the mint's urgent effort to flood the economy with new base metal coins and end the crippling coin shortages that had disrupted vending machines, parking meters, and everyday transactions. Because of this massive production, 1965 quarters are today considered common in circulated condition and generally carry only face value in the marketplace, but they remain historically significant as the very first clad quarter of the United States. Collectors, however, often pursue higher-grade uncirculated examples, particularly those graded MS-66 or MS-67 by professional services, which command higher premiums due to their scarcity in pristine condition, as well as interesting mint errors such as off-center strikes, double dies, or most famously the rare transitional error 1965 quarters struck on leftover 90% silver planchets which were accidentally fed into the presses during the composition changeover. Such silver planchet 1965 quarters-Are extremely rare and highly valuable, often selling for thousands of dollars at auction, making them one of the most famous era coins of modern American numismatics. Beyond its technical and collectible aspects, the 1965 quarter is a cultural artifact of its era, a coin that circulated during a transformative time in U.S. history. It passed through the hands of citizens living through the height of the civil rights movement, the escalation of the Vietnam War, the optimism of the space race, and the social changes of the mid-1960s, making it a silent witness to both turmoil and progress in American society. Since the 1965 quarter represents not just a monetary shift, but also a broader national shift away from precious metal coinage rooted in 19th century traditions toward a modern pragmatic fiat-based system designed to meet the needs of a rapidly growing, increasingly industrialized and globalized economy. While common in numbers, its significance lies in what it symbolizes: adaptation to economic pressures, a break from silver that had defined U.S. coinage for more than a century, and the beginning of the coinage we still use today. Thus, the America quarter dollar 1965 is not merely a small copper-nickel disc worth 25 cents, but a cornerstone of modern U.S. coinage history, bridging the old world of silver money with the new era of base metal coinage, and it remains essential to collectors and historians alike as the true starting point of the quarters that continue to circulate in American pockets over half a century later. Thanks for watching my videos. Please subscribe my channel for more videos.